My guest today is Bernard Fehon. He's a man who travels city to city, getting people out of their homes and getting them to sleep in the street. He's not the deputy sheriff. He's a financial planner with a background in manufacturing and design, and he's here in South Africa to launch CEO Sleepout. Lovely to have you, Bernie.
Thank you, David.
Can you give us a background to what CEO Sleepout is?
Well, over 10 years ago, I became a financial planner. And as you mentioned, I've got a background in manufacturing and design, and manufacturing in Australia was not necessarily the best place to earn an income at that stage. And with one wife and 5 children, I needed enough income to pay the school fees, pay the mortgage. So I changed careers into financial services. My father had been an accountant for many years, so financial services was in the background of the family as well. And I chose to join AMP, which is a very well-respected Australian company with over 150 years of history. Along the way, AMP started a corporate social responsibility program. So AMP Foundation was matching dollar for dollar funds raised where financial planners like myself were involved in charity events. So I put a submission to them, and they agreed to support what we call VINIs, which is the St Vincent de Paul Society. St Vincent de Paul Society is in 140 or more countries around the world, but in Australia it really focuses and has a very good structure to look after homeless and people at risk of homelessness. So they have hundreds of employees, thousands of volunteers doing great work. So as soon as I knew that AMP was handing money to a charity, I chose VINIs. I then got involved, I sometimes say roped in, but I got involved in an organising committee and we were doing fundraising dinners. So we had some very successful dinners, but it was a lot of hard work and raising about $30,000 a year, including the $10,000 a year that AMP were providing.
What were VINIs doing? What was their, they're there to help the homeless, but how did they help?
So one of the most visible things in Western Sydney was the VINIs van, where our children were involved as volunteers, as VINIs engages with the local schools, but many other people volunteer on the VINIs van. So it's branded as VINIs, and it goes from train station to provide some food and conversation for those that are either homeless or near homeless. And that was the most visible for us in Western Sydney. But in addition, I was also aware that they VINIs run the Matthew Talbot Hostel, essentially in King's Cross at Sydney, where there are hundreds of homeless people, and they are providing bedding, shelter overnight, but also outreaching to provide other services. And the work that VINIs does is so much about casework, individually helping people out of this situation into a more sustainable situation. Ideally that means employment, their own place, but that's a long journey for some, and without VINIs we'd have many more than the roughly 100,000 homeless that we have in Australia at the moment. So I think maybe it's something that will never finish. It's physically possible to eliminate homelessness by simply building enough homes, but the issues that cause people to become homeless would still be there, whether that be family breakup, drug and alcohol addiction, mental illness, and VINIs are providing services to the homeless, but also thousands of people that are housed that if they didn't have the support of VINIs would be on the street potentially.
But you've taken it a lot further.
Well,
with your CEO Sleepout.
Well, yes.
I mean, it's a very innovative and it's a project that really tries to show you what it is to be homeless for a night.
That's right. And at that time I was working with a very innovative employee of VINIs. So I'm outside VINIs, he was working with VINIs, Stephen Santucci. And he and I would often try and innovate, talk about what could possibly be done. He had an idea of a program called Trading Places.
Yeah, that's the movie.
Right. Wouldn't it be great to get a government minister for housing to go and live on welfare for a week? We didn't have any takers, but it was that sort of thinking that made the CEO Sleepout idea, when that came up, make some sense. So if we go to February 2006, I was in a committee meeting there was almost no one at the committee. Stephen was on holidays, Lisa was employed by Vinnie's, and Lisa and I were meeting to try and organise the next dinner. And we were deciding, should we have 3 courses or 4 courses? Should we put runners on the table? Should we cover the chairs? You know, and it was a question of how extravagant should the dinner be? And it just seemed a bit incongruous to be having a banquet or a feast to raise money for people who can't afford their next meal. So with a background in engineering and design that you mentioned, and you've heard the term coined in recent years, design thinking, well, that's how I approached problems. Yeah, how do you design a better dinner? Well, maybe the answer is not a dinner at all, it's something else. And during that committee meeting, our children, Julie and I, who have the 5 children, our children were doing sleepouts for Vinnie's at school. So sleepouts themselves were not a new idea.
So they were doing it.
They were already doing a sleepout, and other charities in Australia had done sleepouts before. But the simplicity of this idea is that I said to Lisa, wouldn't it be a bit easier, rather than doing a dinner with entertainment, to just do a CEO Sleepout where we just give them a sausage in a bun? So that's where it was conceived.
Sausage in a bun?
Yeah, so a bread roll and a snag, as we say in Australia. A lot easier than working out whether we should give them 3 or 4 courses.
Yeah. But the whole project is to get CEOs to actually sleep in the cold, in a sleeping bag or whatever.
That's right.
Really emulating or how it would feel to be actually homeless.
That's right. And you know, you can't possibly understand fully by spending one night out the plight of the homeless, but you do get a taste of it. And with a good sleeping bag, you're not too cold, you know, your face is cold, but the ground is hard. And in those early years, and still today, we provide 2 or 3 sheets of cardboard for people to fashion a mattress or a windbreak. And I guess at times in the middle of the night, they'll be saying, I wish I used that windbreak as a mattress. So it's not cold in a good sleeping bag, but it is hard. But the whole event has then evolved to, if we go right back to the first event, there was no entertainment as such, but we needed to do something for the half or
You mean
a dozen.
to keep people occupied?
That's right. So Matthew Talbot Hostel had a rock band. So the homeless guys played their music for us, and the MC interviewed one of the guys, and we heard his story. And still today, 10 years later, the most significant part of the event is when there's now 200, 300 CEOs quietly listening, and someone who has been homeless is telling their story.
Are you still getting that kind of appeal 10 years down the line?
Yeah, absolutely. So
that's in Australia.
That's right. So about 1,000 business and community leaders, mainly CEOs, attend around Australia on the night, and this year it's the 18th of June, the same night as the event here in South Africa.
So do they sometimes say, I did it last year, you do it this year?
Oh, of course. There's different groups of CEOs. There's those that come and then are dedicated and passionate advocates forever. And there's others who've said, yes, I've done my turn, and they'll delegate it to the next level.
Where do you do it in Sydney? Where do you hold this event?
Our first event was at Stadium Australia, the site of the 2000 Olympics.
Well, it's quite comfortable on the grass there.
Well, we weren't even allowed on the grass, so we were told where to go, and as homeless people are often told where to go, but we were in the stands. And then we spent a few years at Luna Park, so on the shores of Sydney Harbour, which is some nice views, but boy, the wind across the water is very cool. When Luna Park is shut down and you're sleeping on the bitumen outside a roller shutter under a little awning, it's not as fun as it is when the Luna Park's open. But then we've spent a few years at a place called Carriage Works, which is the old railway sheds. That was a great place. Because you can imagine homeless people wandering into the railway sheds to get a bit of shelter, and there wasn't much else, a lot of bricks and masonry. So
how do the chaps keep occupied? I mean, do they get talking to each other? And
yeah, there are a lot of conversations.
Event? There must have been some funny instances that have happened, because you've taken this global. You're not only Sydney, you've taken it to a number of other cities as well.
I haven't personally taken it global, but I've always encouraged the spread of the event. And I've certainly connected with many of the people overseas who have run the event. But the idea, I guess, was my gift to Vinnie's. But Vinnie's in Australia have always run the event, so it's a Vinnie's event in Australia. Okay. And other charities around the world have seen it and adopted it and then implemented it. So it has been done in Auckland, New Zealand, in Canada, in New York, in the UK, and now in South Africa.
Have there been any funny incidences that you can recall?
What happens on the Sleepout stays on the Sleepout. No, look,
and it's an all-male event as well.
No,
right?
Not at all.
Oh, no?
Of course not.
Oh.
No, I mean we've got many CEOs in Australia of both sexes, of course, and
so you have to keep watch over.
Everyone has to behave themselves. I think that's what you're suggesting. Look, it's not a fun event, you know. No. The process is, yeah. We have a welcome. We register people. We take their photo. That's to help them with their social media to promote the event and to get sponsors. We'll have 1 hour or 90 minutes of some discussion where we hear from Vinnies who provide the services for people, but then also hear some of their clients and their stories. And like I said before, that's the most impactful part of the night, hearing the stories of people that maybe we wouldn't listen to normally.
Yeah. Bernie, we're going to have to wrap up soon. It's a very short program. I can listen to your stories because I'm sure you've got a lot to tell us. Have you ever slept? I mean, do you do it every year? Are you always out there?
I do it every year, absolutely, and even locally.
You take Julie with you? That's your wife?
Well, no, my wife has slept out at a number of other events. So the CEO Sleepout inspired the Teachers Sleepout, which ran for a few years in Western Sydney as well. So she certainly slept out on those occasions. At times they were on the same night, so I'd be sleeping at Telstra Stadium or Stadium Australia, and she'd be sleeping at Sydney Motorsport Park.
Phones? Cell phones allowed?
Well, yeah. We initially we were discouraging cell phones, but a lot of homeless people have cell phones, as it turns out. And it's become a really important way of promoting through social media, so that even during the night people are tweeting and Facebook messaging and Snapchatting or whatever they're doing these days to gain support and to gain sponsorship. And
we're going to have to wrap up here.
Right.
Johannesburg on the 18th of June is freezing. We're in the Highveld. We don't have the warm current that comes in from the sea that sometimes warms coastal towns, etc. I'm not sure I'm going to be there. Bernie, I'm kidding. It's been lovely talking to you. I wish you all the best with your South African launch. I think it's a very, very noble project and one we certainly need here, particularly with the amount of people we do have in the street.
Fantastic.
You've been on the couch with David Shapiro and with Bernard Fehon.